Hey viewers, today's a follow-on from my previous video, Get Unique Rows from Selected Columns. If you haven't checked that out, please do so, as I'll be using core concepts that I talked about in that one. So here we have product sales broken down by retailer, product, and state. And in the previous video, I showed you how you can get unique lists or combinations from selected columns. So retailer and product and state, and even retailer state, which are not consecutive columns. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to use those lists to create dynamic summaries of your data so that they automatically adjust as the underlying data set changes. Now you can achieve similar results using pivot tables, but they do have some limitations, and I'll talk about those a little later on. So the first summary is a pretty straightforward one. It is a summary by retailer. So what we need is a list of unique retailers, and I've defined that in the working area using this formula. So the if condition is checking if the last row in the data sheet is greater than the header row. So essentially, is there any data? And if there is, then it's going to get the retailer named range, and this is the one that was defined in the previous video. It's going to get a unique list from that named range, then sort it, and then convert the first letter to capital if it isn't already. Now that we have that in our summary, all we need to do is reference that cell. You come to here, first cell, hash, and enter. So here's the formula, equals worksheet, the first cell, and then the hash sign, and that will give you all the retailers. Now, as for the weeks, we want this to be dynamic. So all I do is an equals, come over to the data, and select those weeks. So as the weeks change in the source data, it will automatically update here. Now, for our totals, what we're going to do is just a sum if, because we only have one condition. So equals sum if, and then for the range lookup, it's going to be the data. We're going to look up the retailer column. Okay, I want to lock that in. And what we're going to be looking up, this is the criteria, is this retailer list, the array. So hash again to give us all of them. I don't need to prefix the summary, right, and lock that in. And then what do we want to sum? Well, because we're automatically getting the weeks from the source data, I'm going to assume that the first column in the summary corresponds to the first week in the data. So I can just go to the data and select the first week. Now this one I don't want to lock in, because I'm going to be copying the formulas across, right? And I also want to put an if error around it. So if error 0. All right, so I'll just show you that formula. You can have a closer look at it. So sum if, we're going to be looking up the retailer column in the data, and then look for any matching retailers that we have in this list. And wherever they match, then we want to consolidate the first week's sales. And now I can just copy this all the way across, and it automatically populates it down for all the retailers. And I'll just add another retailer. Okay, here. We're going to call this retailer 5. Right? And it automatically adjusts to include it. All right, so I'll just remove that data for now. So the next summary is by retailer and product. I'll just hide these to give us a bit of room. What we need is the unique list of retailer product combinations, which we defined in the previous video. So over to the working area, we can find those lists. So here's the retailer and the product. So over in the summary, we're going to go equals, working area, first retailer, hash, enter. Same for the product, equals, working area, first product, hash, enter. Right? So here it is, working area, first cell of the retailer and the hash sign, likewise with the product. Now the weeks is exactly the same, we just get the weeks from the data. And because we've got two criteria, we're going to use sum ifs this time, so equals sum ifs. The first parameter is the actual sum range. This is the first week. We're going to be summing the first week in our data. The next parameter is the criteria range, so the first one, and that is going to be our retailer. So go back to the data, select the retailer. I want to lock that in, F4, comma. And so what we're going to look up is the retailer list here. So select the retailer, hash, F4 to lock it in, and I'll just get rid of that, comma. Our second criteria is the product. So over to the data again, select the whole column, F4 to lock it in, comma. Select the product, hash, F4 to lock it in, close the brackets, and that gives us our totals. And add the if error around that again, comma, 0, and then the bracket. So now I can just copy these across. So delete these ones and copy them across. So again, let's go to our data, and I'm going to add another retailer. Let's call this one 6, and we'll put in a different product. Let's put product 5. Retailer 6 has been added, product 5 has been added without having to change any formulas. Let me just remove that data again. Now the next summary is going to be very similar, except we are doing the retailer state combination. So again, we want the unique retailer state combinations that we defined in the previous video. So over to the working area, that is these two columns here. Right. Again, over in the summary, just going to go equals, back to our working area, first cell, hash, enter. Same with the state, equals, over to working area, first state, hash, enter. So this gives us our dynamic list. The weeks are the same, and the sum ifs is pretty much identical to the retailer product one, except we're using the state instead. Same thing, summing the data in the first week. We're going to look up the retailer in the data and look for the list of retailers that are in column S here. Second criteria, look up the state column this time in the data, and the criteria we're looking for is the list of states in column T over here. Let's go and add some data here. All right, we're going to go with retailer 7, product 8, and let's add a state that we don't have. Let's go Tasmania. Right, over to the summary, retailer 7 and Tasmania. There we go. Let me add another one so you can see how we'll consolidate the totals for it. Copy product 8 Tasmania. This should double up. There you go, 380, 580. So the totals have doubled, which is what we expected. Now, if you wanted, you could also apply conditional formatting that is dynamic. So as the summary gets bigger or smaller, the formatting is automatically applied to just the used rows. And I do have a separate video called Dynamic Conditional Formatting. So if you're interested, please check that out so you can see how to apply it to something like this. But essentially, you could have different background colors for the key columns here and perhaps a different color for the volumes. Now, as I mentioned, you can achieve similar results using a pivot table, but they do have some limitations. Here I have one by retailer product. Now, the first issue I have with pivot tables is they don't automatically refresh whenever the data updates. You need to manually refresh it. So click on here and refresh. Alternatively, you could create a macro that will do it for you, or set your workbook so that whenever it opens, it refreshes the data. But that's really only useful if you have your data in another workbook and you've linked them. The next limitation with pivot tables is the data has to be in certain structure. So, for instance, you can't have duplicate column names. They need to be unique. Now, if I try to change the default name sum of, it won't let me because the underlying source column is also called that. So I would need to call it something like week. All right. It's not a big deal, but just something to consider. The other thing is column names need to be static. So if they ever change, then that new name won't appear automatically in your pivot. So in this case, where I have rolling weeks, so next week, the data, when it gets pasted in here, the 1st of January is going to become the 8th. So let me just simulate that. That becomes the 8th. So I've got the 8th all the way to the 12th of February. Now, if I come back to my pivot and manually do a refresh, you see the first week has updated, but we don't have the 12th, right? Because it's a new column. I have to come to the field list over here, and over here I can see the 12th of February, and then I can add it, right? So you need to do that manually. Right. Alternatively, what you need is to make sure you have your data in certain structure. So in this case, you would want a date column, and your weeks would be down here. And then you would have a volume, let's say volume column here. So these would no longer be required, and you have your totals here. That's what a pivot table would be expecting. Now, just to show you quickly how the summaries I created are dynamic, I've just inserted these two columns. If I come over to the summary, you can see nothing has broken, right? I can unhide these, and you can see they look the same. The weeks have updated automatically, right? Everything's as it should be. Now I don't need these. Now, finally, with pivot tables, and this is really a matter of opinion, find them a little clunky, quite awkward to design and use. But that's just me. If you're happy using them, by all means, go for it. What I've presented is just an alternate way of producing summaries that are dynamic. Anyway, it's up to you. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.